It's Misty from the Suburban Edge. It's raining cats and dogs out there. And today I'm going to talk to you about green squash. We ran out and harvested all of our green tomatoes and all of the rest of the squash. The season is over. We got all the beans, everything. And I wanted to talk to you about green squash in general. And I'm talking about green winter squash. You've reached the Suburban Edge. It's that place where together we can learn modern homesteading skills. And one of the things I wanted to do is figure out how to use this before it turned into this. Yuck. This is a green butternut squash that I did not store in the fridge. So if you pull green squash, you have to keep it in the fridge. It just doesn't have that hard coating that will help keep it. So this is just starting to turn. I think we're good, but keep them in the fridge. What we'll be making today is a yeasted bread, much like a potato bread, only we're going to use green squash. So this is a different kind of making bread. It is actually, in my opinion, a little bit lazy. You just throw the dough together and then put it in the fridge for at least 24 hours. But it takes more time. So if you're in a hurry, this is not the bread for you. Any winter squash that's green is going to act a lot like a potato. It's not going to have that deep, rich squash flavor. It's going to be very starchy still. And it has a lot of the same characteristics as a potato. So most people on the internet will tell you that you can peel it and use it like you would a potato. You can boil it, mash it, roast it, fry it. There's lots of recipes for that. So I got to thinking, can I make potato bread only using my green squash? And let me tell you, I developed this recipe. It's awesome! So if you have green squash, don't throw it away, don't throw it in the compost pile. Follow me, do what I do. I will tell you that this bread also works with green spaghetti squash. And the first time I ever tried it, I did a mix of green spaghetti squash and green butternut. You probably can use green acorn squash as well. Any green winter squash. So I hope you give this a try. First thing is just peel your squash. See, I caught that early enough. It's just a little skin deep, but again, the fridge. Okay, now cut it in half lengthwise. Get a spoon and get rid of all these seeds. Like that. Cut off the stem and the blossom ends and just chop it up in pieces about a ½ inch thick. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. You can see that the pieces are definitely not like butternut, right? They're a little green. And the goal is to make them uniform because you're going to boil these. Okay, we're going to put these in a pan. Cover them with water and put them on the stove. So I've got my water in there. I'm going to take it over to the stove and cook it until it's just fork tender. And then I'm going to drain the water. Okay, I want to save the squash water. I need to strain it into this. Once you've strained out your green squash, you can just put it back in the original container, and now you have your squash water. You just smash this up, then put it in a bowl and put it in the fridge. Everything you're doing is going to be from very cold conditions. We're making a cold fermented yeast dough. So go ahead and cover that with plastic wrap and put it in the fridge. Same with your squash water. Cover that and put it in the fridge, and I'll come back when everything's chilled down. Now, the exception is your butter. You need 3 tablespoons of butter softened. It's the only thing you're going to be using besides the flour that isn't cold. So everything else in the ingredients list, I've linked the recipe down below as usual, is going to be chilled. In a large mixing bowl, you need to put all of your ingredients, your cold ingredients. So the first thing you're going to want to put in here is your cold squash water, and you need 1/2 of a cup. 1/3 cup green squash, cooked and mashed and cold. 1 egg. I'm using 3/4 of a teaspoon of regular table salt because I'm using salted butter. If you're using unsalted butter, you can bump that up to a teaspoon. In goes the salt. Here we have 2 rounded tablespoons of white sugar. That goes in there. We're going to add our yeast that is cold from the fridge, and that is going to be 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Now our softened butter, 3 tablespoons. Mix this well. It's okay if your butter just... Thank you, Phoebe. So my butter's just room temperature, and you can see it's like kind of chunky in there. I'm not going to worry about it, but I just try to break it up into as small pieces as possible. Because I used room temperature butter, but everything else was cold, then the butter is just going to do that, right? That makes sense. This is good enough. Now we're going to add our flour. For this recipe, you need about 3 cups of all-purpose flour, but what you're going to put in here is 2.5 cups. Remember, the best way to measure is to spoon into your measuring cup and then scrape off the top. We're not packing the flour in there. There's my halfer, and I need 2 more of these cup sizes. I'm just using regular all-purpose flour. Again, you can use bread flour. I haven't really found there to be much of a difference with this method of cold fermenting. Seems like it works just fine with all-purpose, and it's what most people have on hand. So there's my 2.5 cups. I'm going to just put it in here. And in this bowl, I'm going to put an extra 1/2 cup. Leave your flour out. You may need more. Okay, we're going to mix this up. And then you're going to get to a point where you're going to just need to dig in your hands. I like to get a little bit of flour on my hands. This will be sticky. You can do a lot of the mixing in the bowl. So what we're doing is we're hydrating that flour, right? We're taking all of our wet ingredients and we're mixing that flour in. And we don't want to put in so much flour that our bread becomes tough. So this is a little bit of a science, right? We're going to take our time and let this dough pick up the flour from the bowl first before we add any more flour in. And you can mix in the bowl. I find it cumbersome. I like to mix on a surface, but I've definitely seen plenty of bakers do all of their mixing in a bowl. And again, you can use a mixer. I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of flour on my non-stick mat, not much at all, and bring this over here. Now, this is my flour that I set aside, this extra 1/2 cup. I don't know if I'm going to need to use it all, but I'm just going to continue to mix in. It's still very sticky, and you want to knead this until it's a nice smooth dough. And if you have a bench scraper, this would be a good time to get that out, because it will start to stick here and you just want to keep pulling it up, adding tiny, minute amounts of flour until it's just barely sticky. You don't want it sticking to your palms. This is actually coming together quite nicely, but I want to work this dough for about 8 minutes. So you might ask me, why don't I just put the whole 3 cups of flour in at the beginning? Well, every time you make bread, conditions are different. You might have a rainy day or some cold day where there's a lot of condensation in your house, very moist squash content. Maybe you didn't drain your squash very well. The egg is bigger than normal. You may have more liquid or less liquid in that particular dough at the time that you make it. By controlling that last half cup, you won't end up putting in too much flour, because that will make your bread dry and tough and not correct. By doing it this way, you're doing it by feel. This is the way people have made bread for generations, and it's a time-honored way of making bread. So at the end of your 8 minutes, you're going to have a bread that's not sticking to your palms, right? It's going to be a nice dough. I mean, you're going to have a dough that's nice and smooth across the top. And yeah, you'll see chunks. I'll come over there. It'll be nice and smooth across the top. You'll see chunks of squash. That's okay. And if you indent it, that dent sort of stays in there but wants to bounce back. That means you've created some gluten, right? You've moved that, stretched that dough around. Now it's time to cold ferment it. Now you're going to put this in the fridge. I have a bowl here that I've buttered, and you want to just take your ball of dough and put it in the bowl with the butter in it and flip it over, and then cover it with saran wrap, put it in the fridge for about 24 hours. Or this would be a great time to just butter the ball or put a little olive oil on it, slip it into a zip top bag, maybe 2 zip top bags, and throw it in the freezer, because it can cold ferment in there. It will stay good for about 3 months. If you go the freezer route, what you want to do is 2 days before you want to make this dough, take it out of the freezer to continue fermenting in the fridge. So it will defrost, and then you need another day for it to ferment. So make sure it's got plenty of some kind of fat on it so it won't stick to your bowl. And then once that second day has happened, you can shape it however you like. We're gonna make this loaf tomorrow, so I'll see you mañana. In the fridge it goes. You can take your leftover flour and rub it around in your bowl to get rid of all the extra sticky. You don't want this going down your drain, so you can just take the flour and your fingers and get all that extra dough off the sides of your bowl, and then just toss it in the trash. It'll clean up a lot nicer. It's been over 24 hours since we put our green squash dough in the fridge to cold ferment. It's time to shape it and put it in our pan. I'm going to be making some sandwich bread. So I have a regular loaf pan that I have greased just with butter. Grease it with whatever you want, but I like butter, works really well. I like knowing it's touched every surface, and for some reason I can do that with butter. Let's just get started. You're gonna need some flour on a surface, not too much, but it may be a little sticky coming out of the fridge. Nope. So here's my cold dough, and you just want to come down here. I'm going to shape it. You can can roll it with a pin if you want. I'm just too lazy to get another thing out. What I like to do is shape it like, sort of like an egg. You don't want to make it wider than the pan you're cooking in. If you're making rolls, make rolls. And then I kind of like it to be a little narrower at the top, sort of like this. Okay, so I'm going to turn it toward myself. And what you want to do is just start rolling and pulling back. What you're getting out any large air bubbles by doing that. Just roll it up. You can pinch that seam closed. Seam side down. You want to put it in your loaf pan. I made mine a little long, but that's okay. I can kind of force it. See that? Now I'm going to just push it into place so it covers up the whole bottom of the loaf pan. Kind of tucking in my ends. It's going to be something like that. So proofing or fermenting can happen in anywhere in your kitchen. It'll take about 3 hours. I need to speed it up. I'm going to use my dehydrator. I want to put my dehydrator on 95 degrees and cover this with a thin damp cloth, which I'm just going to use a thin damp paper towel. What I don't want is for the top of my dough to get crunchy and dry. So this will only work with like the cloth-like paper towels. You just want to keep the top of the dough from drying out. Something like that. And then put your cover on or close the door if you fancy. And what I want to do is set this at the lowest temperature, which for my machine is 95 degrees. And for time, I'm going to set it for 2 hours. After 2 hours, I'm going to come back and show you what we have, and then we're ready to bake. Hopefully it'll work out. I'm always experimenting, my people, and I will see you in a bit. In the last hour of your proofing, so check it, you want it to about double in size. You want to preheat your oven at 320 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have a pizza stone or a skillet that you can preheat in there as well, that will really give the bread a nice crust at the bottom. It's not necessary. You for sure don't have to do it, but I really like how it works out. So I'm going to put this in the oven and get it preheated. That rose, it did really well in the dehydrator. Now we're going to brush it with some egg yolk. Also, not mandatory. So you just put the egg yolk across the top, just an egg yolk wash, I guess. It will make the top of your loaf darker. Kind of gives it a sort of almost a brioche style crust. And you can save the rest of the egg for a scramble or a egg white omelet. Don't throw it away. Okay, everything's preheated. I'm going to pop this in the oven on top of that preheated skillet for 40 minutes. There it is. It's beautiful. 40 minutes at 320, and we are going to let it sit for 5 minutes, and then we'll take it out of the bread pan. Actually, it's been longer than 5 minutes. I took it out of the pan a while back, and it's just sitting here. Look at that lovely crust. In a minute, we're going to dig into it and try our squash bread, and I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. Okay, are you ready to see what it looks like inside? Right out of the middle. I am terrible at cutting bread. Oh, I wish you could smell this. Here it is. It's so pretty. It's got a nice, soft crumb. And, oh, gonna give it a taste. Man, that's good. I'm gonna put some homemade strawberry rhubarb jam on there in a minute. Might be my dinner. As always, thanks for joining me today. I am so glad that you came to visit me in my home while we made green squash bread. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It really does help the YouTube algorithm tell people about me, and it helps the channel grow. If you have any comments, if you've ever tried anything like this with green squash, let me know. Have a great day. God bless you. You want to know all about the squash? I got some videos right there for you. Bye.